Long before the solar system settled into the quiet balance we recognize today, there may have been worlds that never survived long enough to become familiar names. Planets that formed briefly, and then disappeared without leaving obvious traces. And this possibility rests gently within the earliest stages of planetary formation, when dust and gas circled the young sun in a wide, slow-moving disk, and within this disk, countless fragments gathered, collided, separated, and reformed, creating temporary worlds that existed only for short cosmic moments. And these early planets were not stable or permanent, but soft and unfinished, shaped by motion rather than order. And as gravity pulled material together, it also created instability, allowing some bodies to grow while others were torn apart or pushed away. And this environment was not chaotic in a violent sense, but fluid and experimental, as though the solar system itself was quietly testing possibilities, allowing some to remain and others to fade. And these lost planets did not vanish suddenly or dramatically, but were slowly dismantled by repeated collisions, tidal forces, and shifting gravitational patterns, and over time, their matter was redistributed into other forming bodies, becoming part of planets that still exist today. And this quiet recycling feels deeply calming, because it suggests that nothing was truly destroyed, only rearranged. And as you imagine these early worlds, there is no need to picture them clearly, because they existed in a time before defined surfaces or atmospheres, existing more as gentle concentrations of matter than solid places. And their disappearance did not leave silence or emptiness, but contributed to the stability that followed, and the solar system gradually moved toward balance, not by preserving every formation, but by allowing some to dissolve naturally. And this process mirrors rest itself, where thoughts form briefly before fading without consequence. And as these early planets disappeared, the sun continued to glow steadily, unconcerned with individual outcomes, providing constant warmth and gravity, while matter found its own equilibrium. And the remaining planets slowly settled into predictable orbits, their paths smoothing over millions of years, while the lost worlds became memory without record, existing only as subtle influences within asteroids, moons, and planetary cores. And this absence feels gentle rather than tragic, because it represents completion rather than loss, and the idea that planets could exist without leaving names or myths feels comforting, reminding us that existence does not require recognition to have meaning. And as the solar system matured, collisions became less frequent, orbits stabilized, and the remaining planets grew quieter, their surfaces cooling, their motions becoming rhythmic and dependable, while the early experimental phase faded into deep time, and the lost planets became part of the background story, no longer separate entities, but ingredients within a larger whole. And this integration feels peaceful, because it removes the need to mourn what never fully was, and instead invites appreciation for the calm that followed. And as you drift within this narrative, the idea of planetary loss feels less like disappearance and more like rest, as though those early worlds simply settled into a deeper layer of existence, no longer distinct, but still present in subtle ways. And the asteroids that now orbit the sun carry fragments of these early bodies, silent witnesses to a time of gentle trial and error. And these fragments move slowly, predictably, their paths stable and unhurried, and this stability feels reassuring, because it reflects the universe's tendency toward calm over time. And as the story softens, awareness no longer tries to separate fact from possibility, allowing both to exist together without tension. And the early solar system becomes less a place of danger, and more a place of quiet unfolding, where not everything was meant to last, and that impermanence feels natural and soothing, and the idea that planets could form, exist briefly, and then dissolve without consequence suggests that existence itself does not require permanence to be complete, and as this understanding settles, the mind relaxes further, releasing the need for continuity or explanation, allowing the story to flow gently without sharp edges. And the lost planets rest now within the solar system they helped shape, their matter dispersed, their identities softened beyond recognition, and this softening feels kind, because it removes finality, allowing everything to remain connected, and the sun continues to shine over this quiet arrangement, illuminating planets that remain, while carrying within its gravity the memory of those that did not, and this memory does not disturb the present, but supports it, creating balance through absence, and as time continues, the solar system remains calm and predictable, its early restlessness resolved into long-term stability, and the lost planets remain part of this stability, not as missing pieces, but as quiet contributors, and this quiet contribution feels deeply restful, allowing awareness to drift without effort, supported by the idea that nothing truly disappears, but simply changes form and function, and within this gentle transformation, the universe continues calmly, unbothered by what did not endure, resting comfortably in what remains, and as the story continues beyond attention, sleep settles naturally, carrying with it the calm knowledge that even worlds that vanish leave behind balance, order, and quiet continuity. Beyond the quiet disappearance of early planetary bodies, there exists another gentle mystery woven into the solar system's past, the idea that some planets may not have formed close to the sun at all, but arrived from far beyond, wandering worlds that drifted through interstellar space before briefly becoming part of our system, and these planets did not announce themselves with drama or violence, but moved slowly, guided by gravity's subtle pull, passing through regions of darkness long before encountering the sun's influence, and as they approached, the sun's gravity may have captured them temporarily, allowing them to circle quietly for a time, existing as guests rather than permanent residents. And this possibility feels calm rather than chaotic, because capture does not require impact or disruption, only alignment and patience, and within this gentle process, a wandering planet could have shared space with the forming worlds, influencing their paths subtly, shifting orbits slightly, redistributing material without leaving clear scars, and over time, these captured planets may have continued onward, released once more into the wider galaxy, leaving behind only faint gravitational memories that softened as the system stabilized. And this coming and going feels deeply peaceful, like a slow tide rather than a sudden event. And the solar system appears comfortable with such transitions, allowing bodies to pass through without resistance. And as you imagine these wandering planets, there is no need to picture them clearly or solidly, because their presence was temporary and fluid, shaped by motion rather than permanence, and they may have carried ice, rock, or gas, contributing small amounts of material to the system before drifting away, and this quiet exchange feels natural, suggesting that the solar system was never a closed environment, but part of a much larger cosmic neighborhood, and this openness feels soothing, because it removes the idea of strict boundaries, allowing everything to exist within a shared space without ownership or attachment. And as these wandering planets move through, the sun remains steady and unchanged, its light constant, its gravity patient, neither pulling too tightly nor pushing away, simply allowing movement to occur, and the planets that remained gradually settled into stable orbits, their paths smoothing over time, while the temporary visitors faded into deep space, carrying with them no sense of loss or disruption. And this fading feels gentle, because it reflects the universe's preference for balance over permanence, and the idea that planets could come and go without consequence mirrors the way thoughts pass through awareness during rest, appearing briefly before dissolving without trace. And as this parallel settles, the mind relaxes further, releasing the need to hold onto any single idea, allowing everything to drift naturally. And the solar system's early openness becomes less a mystery to solve and more a quiet state to observe, where motion and stillness coexist without conflict. And even the myths that arise from this idea feel soft and distant, not urgent or demanding explanation, but simply another layer of story resting atop deep time. And these myths suggest hidden planets, vanished worlds, or lost companions to the sun. Yet beneath them lies a calm reality, where gravity and time gently shape outcomes without intention, and the wandering planets, whether real or imagined, feel less like missing pieces, and more like passing notes in a long, slow melody, contributing briefly before fading into silence. And this silence feels complete rather than empty, because it allows the remaining structure to rest undisturbed. And as the solar system matured, interactions became fewer, orbits stabilized, and the memory of wandering worlds softened into possibility rather than history. And this softening feels kind, because it allows mystery to exist without tension, and the asteroids and distant objects that remain may carry subtle hints of these past encounters, small irregularities in motion or composition. Yet these hints do not disturb the present calm, existing quietly within predictable patterns, and the universe does not insist on clarity here, allowing uncertainty to remain part of its natural state. And this allowance feels deeply restful, because it removes the pressure to resolve every question. And as awareness drifts within this gentle uncertainty, sleep deepens naturally, supported by the idea that not everything needs explanation to be complete. And the wandering planets, whether they existed or not, rest now within the broader story of the galaxy, their paths continuing far beyond the sun's reach, while the solar system remains stable and calm, illuminated by steady light. And this stability feels earned through patience rather than control. And as the story continues beyond attention, it does so quietly, without urgency or demand, allowing rest to remain uninterrupted. And the universe continues its slow movement, open and accepting, holding both what stayed and what passed through with equal calm. And within this calm, awareness settles fully, drifting into deep, unbroken sleep, carried by the same gentle forces that guide planets, stars, and the endless night beyond them. Among the quieter ideas surrounding lost planets is the gentle possibility that some worlds never fully formed at all, existing only as near planets that hovered between becoming something defined and dissolving back into the disk of material that surrounded the young sun. And these almost planets did not fail in any dramatic sense, but simply followed a natural path shaped by timing and balance, where gravity gathered material slowly, but not always enough to create permanence. And in this early era, the solar system was patient and forgiving, allowing matter to collect, pause, and then drift apart again without urgency. And these near planets may have existed as soft concentrations of dust, ice, and rock, loosely held together, quietly orbiting the sun for long periods before gradually dispersing. And their dispersal did not create gaps or damage, but contributed to the smooth distribution of material that later allowed stable planets to thrive. And this idea feels deeply calming, because it reframes disappearance as completion rather than failure. And as you imagine these almost worlds, there is no need to assign them surfaces, atmospheres, or identities, because they existed more as gentle possibilities than finished places, and their presence was subtle, influencing the motion of nearby material, without demanding attention. And as time passed, the sun continued to shine steadily, offering constant warmth and gravity, while allowing matter to find its own balance, and the near planets slowly lost definition, their particles rejoining the wider disk, becoming part of asteroids, moons, and planetary rings that still exist today. And this quiet redistribution feels harmonious, because nothing was wasted or erased, only transformed, and the solar system seems comfortable with this kind of soft change, allowing some paths to resolve without leaving clear records. And this comfort mirrors the way the mind behaves during deep rest, where ideas begin to form but dissolve before becoming thoughts, leaving no trace and no disturbance. And as this parallel settles, awareness relaxes further, releasing the need to complete or resolve anything. And the near planets rest now not as missing worlds, but as part of everything else, their matter spread evenly across the system, supporting balance without being seen. And this unseen support feels reassuring, because it suggests that not all contributions need to be visible to matter. And as the solar system matured, its remaining planets settled into stable orbits, their motions predictable and calm, while the memory of near planets softened into deep time, existing only as a possibility within scientific models and quiet speculation. And this speculation does not demand answers, but invites gentle curiosity without urgency. And the universe seems to welcome this openness, allowing some questions to remain unanswered without tension. And as awareness drifts within this calm uncertainty, the idea of lost or unfinished planets becomes less mysterious and more peaceful, representing a natural stage of formation rather than a problem to solve. And the sun's gravity continues to hold everything gently, guiding matter without forcing outcomes. And this guidance feels like a steady presence, rather than a controlling force, offering stability while allowing freedom. And the remaining material moves slowly now, its early restlessness resolved into long-term balance. And the near planets, having never fully separated from this material, rest comfortably within it, indistinguishable and complete in their own way. And this indistinguishability feels kind, because it removes the pressure to stand apart or endure, allowing existence to be shared rather than defined. And as the story continues, the early solar system feels less like a place of loss and more like a place of gentle refinement, where only what needed to remain did so, and everything else found its way back into the whole. And this refinement was not harsh or selective, but gradual and patient, guided by time rather than intention. And as time stretched onward, the system grew quieter, its motion smoother, its structure simpler, and the near planets became part of this simplicity, contributing without requiring recognition. And this contribution feels deeply restful, because it suggests that even incomplete things belong fully. And as awareness rests within this idea, thoughts soften further, becoming lighter and less distinct, drifting like the early material around the sun, forming briefly before dissolving without consequence. And the story itself becomes less something to follow, and more something to rest within, its tone steady and gentle. And the universe continues calmly, unbothered by what did not fully form, holding both presence and absence with equal ease. And this ease allows sleep to deepen naturally, awareness sinking beneath the surface of thought into a quiet state, where nothing needs to be finished or remembered. And the near planets rest now, within the balance they helped create. their quiet existence complete, and the solar system remains calm and stable beneath the sun's steady light, carrying forward without disturbance. While the night deepens and rest continues uninterrupted, another quiet thread in the story of lost planets drifts through the idea that some worlds may have formed peacefully and existed for long stretches of time, before slowly being reshaped into something else entirely. Not destroyed, not expelled, but gently transformed by gradual processes that left no sharp boundaries between what they were and what they became. And in this early solar system, change often happened so slowly that it felt like stillness, with gravity acting patiently over millions of years, subtly stretching, compressing, and warming planetary bodies until their original forms softened. And these worlds may have begun as solid planets, only to evolve into belts of debris, clouds of fragments, or diffuse collections of material that no longer resembled a single object. And this transformation did not require violence, only time, and time in the universe moves quietly, without urgency, allowing structures to loosen and redistribute naturally. And as these planets changed, they did not vanish suddenly, but faded gradually, their identities dissolving into broader regions of space, contributing to rings, asteroid belts, or distant clouds that still orbit the sun today. And this idea feels soothing, because it suggests continuity rather than loss. And as you imagine these planets, there is no need to picture a moment of disappearance, but rather a long, gentle process of becoming less defined, like a shoreline slowly reshaped by calm waves. And the solar system seems comfortable with this kind of change, allowing forms to blur and evolve without resistance. And as these planets softened into collections of smaller pieces, their influence remained, shaping the orbits of nearby bodies, guiding motion even as their own structure became diffuse. And this lingering influence feels reassuring, because it suggests that presence does not end when form changes. And the sun's gravity continued to hold everything together gently, guiding both solid planets and scattered material with the same steady force. And this steadiness feels constant and dependable, creating a background of calm against which all change occurs. And the transformed planets did not compete with the remaining worlds, but settled into complementary roles, becoming quiet regions that absorbed energy, stabilized motion, and softened interactions across the system. And this softness feels intentional, even if it was not planned, because it created balance without effort. And as the system matured, these diffuse regions became familiar features, no longer recognized as former planets, but accepted as natural components of the solar system's structure. And this acceptance feels kind, because it removes the idea of failure or disappearance, replacing it with transformation and belonging. And the myths that grow around these regions often speak of shattered worlds or ancient catastrophes. Yet beneath these stories lies a calmer reality, where change unfolded gradually, without drama, and the universe does not insist on sharp endings, preferring slow transitions that allow everything to remain connected. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to release the need for clear beginnings and endings, allowing states to blend naturally. And the transformed planets rest now within this blending, their matter spread gently across space, supporting balance without drawing attention. And this quiet support mirrors the way background thoughts fade during rest, remaining present without demanding focus. And as this parallel settles, the mind relaxes further, drifting deeper into calm, and the solar system's past becomes less a sequence of events and more a slow, continuous flow, where form and identity shift without conflict. And this flow feels deeply peaceful, because it suggests that nothing is ever truly lost, only changed in ways that support the whole, and the sun continues to illuminate everything evenly, its light touching planets, dust, and empty space alike, without distinction, and this evenness feels comforting, removing hierarchy and urgency, and the remaining planets move in steady orbits, their paths smooth and predictable, while the transformed worlds exist quietly alongside them, no longer separate but still present, and this coexistence feels natural, as if it was always meant to be this way, and as time stretches onward, the memory of distinct planetary forms fades, leaving behind regions that feel timeless and stable, and these regions do not ask to be understood or defined, existing comfortably within uncertainty, and this comfort invites rest, allowing awareness to drift without effort, and the story itself becomes less important than the feeling it creates, a gentle sense of continuity and calm, and the universe continues its slow movement, unbothered by labels or definitions, holding all forms and transformations with equal patience, and within this patience, sleep deepens naturally, supported by the idea that change does not require loss, and that even when forms dissolve, their essence remains woven into the larger structure, and the transformed planets rest now within this structure, complete in their quiet contribution, while the solar system remains balanced and calm, beneath the steady light of the sun, and the night continues, deep and undisturbed, carrying awareness gently into rest. Another soft possibility in the tale of lost planets rests in the idea that some worlds were quietly pulled inward toward the sun, not through sudden collapse or dramatic fall, but through a slow inward drift caused by subtle gravitational exchanges that unfolded over immense spans of time, and in the early solar system, nothing rushed, because gravity works most gently when it works longest, and these inward, moving planets may have begun far from the sun, circling peacefully in wide orbits before gradual interactions with surrounding material caused their paths to tighten, and this tightening did not feel like danger or loss, but like a slow settling, as if the planets were being invited closer rather than forced, and as they moved inward, the environment around them changed slowly, with increasing warmth and light, reshaping their surfaces and internal structures without urgency. And some of these worlds may have adapted for a time, their materials shifting, atmospheres thinning or thickening, before eventually reaching regions where stability was no longer possible, and yet even this instability unfolded gently, without sharp moments of destruction. And as these planets moved closer to the sun, they may have begun to lose material gradually, their outer layers evaporating or drifting away, forming streams of dust and gas that joined the inner system, and this loss did not feel like disappearance, but redistribution, with every particle finding a new place within the solar system's balance. And the sun remained steady throughout, its gravity constant, its light unwavering, allowing change to occur without conflict, and the inward, drifting planets slowly softened, their identities blurring as they became less distinct and more diffuse, and over time, they may have dissolved entirely into rings of material, clouds of particles, or faint trails that merged seamlessly with the sun's surrounding space, and this merging feels deeply calming, because it suggests a return rather than an end, and as you imagine these planets, there is no need to picture a final moment, only a long, gradual blending into light and warmth, and the solar system accepted this blending without disruption, its remaining planets continuing their paths undisturbed, as if such transformations were always expected, and this expectation feels reassuring, because it removes the idea of error or accident, replacing it with natural progression. and the myths that arise from this process often speak of swallowed worlds or vanished companions to the sun. Yet beneath these stories lies a quieter truth, where movement inward was simply one of many possible outcomes, and the universe does not assign meaning or judgment to such outcomes, allowing each path to unfold peacefully. And as awareness rests within this idea, it becomes easier to release fear of endings, understanding that even inward movement leads to contribution rather than loss, and the material from these planets may now exist within the sun itself, within inner system dust, or within the subtle composition of remaining worlds, supporting stability without being seen. And this unseen support feels gentle and complete. And as time continued, the inner solar system settled into balance, its structure simplified and calm, while the memory of inward, drifting planets faded into deep time, existing now only as quiet possibilities within scientific thought and gentle imagination. And this fading feels kind, because it allows mystery to remain without tension, and the universe appears content to hold unanswered questions softly, without demanding resolution. And as awareness drifts deeper, the idea of planets moving inward becomes less a story of disappearance and more a story of return, where everything eventually finds its place within the whole. And this sense of belonging feels deeply restful, encouraging the mind to loosen its grip on boundaries and definitions. And the sun continues to shine evenly, illuminating both what remains visible and what has blended into lights and space. And this even illumination feels comforting, removing distinction between presence and absence. And the remaining planets move calmly in their orbits, their paths smooth and unchanging, supported by the quiet contributions of everything that came before. And as the night deepens, the story itself softens, becoming less something to follow and more something to rest within. And the inward, drifting planets rest, now within the warmth they approached so slowly, their journey complete, while the solar system remains balanced and peaceful, and awareness continues to drift gently toward deep, uninterrupted sleep, carried by the same patient forces that guide stars, planets, and the endless calm of space. There is also a soothing idea that some lost planets were never meant to remain independent worlds, but existed briefly as companions to larger planets, forming as temporary partners, before slowly dissolving into moons, rings, or scattered material. And in the early solar system, this kind of companionship was common, because gravity often gathered matter into shared paths rather than solitary ones, and these proto-planets may have orbited alongside growing giants, moving together in slow, harmonious motion, their gravitational connection gentle and balanced, and for long periods of time, these paired worlds may have shared space peacefully, influencing each other's shapes, rotations, and internal structures without conflict. And as time passed, the larger planet's gravity gradually became dominant, not suddenly or forcefully, but patiently, drawing material from its companion little by little, reshaping it into rings, moons, or diffuse clouds that remained close by. And this process did not involve destruction, but transformation through closeness, where separation slowly faded into unity. And this idea feels deeply calming, because it frames loss as merging rather than ending. And as you imagine these companion planets, there is no sharp moment where one disappears, only a long, quiet blending, where boundaries soften until they no longer matter. And the solar system allowed this blending naturally, its early environment flexible and forgiving, encouraging structures to evolve into stable configurations over time. And the remaining moons and rings we see today may carry the quiet memory of these lost companions, their material arranged into patterns that feel balanced and enduring. and this endurance feels reassuring, because it suggests that even brief existences contribute to long-term stability, and the myths that surround these formations often speak of shattered worlds or violent collisions. Yet beneath these stories lies a calmer truth, where gravity worked slowly and patiently, guiding matter into shapes that supported balance rather than chaos, and the universe seems to prefer these quiet resolutions, where change happens without drama. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept closeness and change without fear, understanding that merging does not erase meaning, but redistributes it, and the companion planets, having given their material to larger worlds, remain present within the system, not as separate identities, but as supportive structures that stabilize motion and reflect light softly, and this soft reflection feels peaceful, like a gentle glow rather than a bright flare. And as time continued, the solar system settled into fewer, more stable configurations, its earlier complexity smoothing into simplicity, while the memory of companion worlds faded into deep time, existing now as quiet possibilities, rather than defined histories. And this fading does not feel like loss, but like rest, allowing the system to remain calm and predictable. And the sun continues to illuminate everything evenly, touching planets, moons, and rings without distinction, and this evenness feels comforting, removing hierarchy and urgency, and the remaining planets follow their paths steadily, supported by structures formed through gentle merging rather than force. And as the night deepens, the story itself becomes softer, less focused on events, and more on the feeling of slow, patient balance. And the companion planets rest, now within the worlds they helped shape, their presence subtle but complete, while the solar system continues calmly beneath the steady light of the sun, and awareness drifts further into quiet rest, carried by the same gentle gravity that guides planets, moons, and the endless silence of space. Another gentle possibility drifts through the history of the solar system in the idea that some planets were quietly pushed outward rather than inward, slowly migrating toward the cold edges of space through delicate gravitational conversations with larger worlds. And this outward movement did not feel like exile or rejection, but like a gradual release, where a planet's path widened little by little, until the sun's warmth became faint and distant. And in the early system, such outward drifting was common, because gravity does not only pull inward, it also redistributes motion, allowing some bodies to trade energy and gently move away. And these planets may have traveled slowly across vast distances, their journeys taking millions of years, long enough for any sense of motion to feel like stillness. And as they moved farther from the sun, their surfaces cooled, their activity slowed, and their identities softened, becoming quieter with distance. And eventually, some of these worlds may have reached regions where the sun's influence weakened enough for them to slip free entirely, not suddenly, but through a slow loosening of connection, like a hand gently letting go. And this release feels peaceful, because it does not involve separation through force, but through balance. And as you imagine these outward, drifting planets, there is no dramatic farewell, only a gradual fading of light as the sun becomes a distant star, and the universe welcomes these worlds into interstellar space without resistance, offering them endless darkness and calm. And the solar system does not seem disturbed by their departure, because balance was maintained throughout the process, and the remaining planets adjusted quietly, their orbits settling into new stability. And the myths that grow from this idea often speak of rogue planets or hidden worlds beyond the known edges. Yet beneath these stories lies a tranquil truth, where movement outward was simply another natural outcome of early formation, and the universe appears comfortable with letting things drift away when their paths lead elsewhere. And this comfort feels deeply soothing, because it mirrors the way thoughts gently move out of awareness during rest, leaving no sense of loss behind, and the outward, drifting planets continue their journeys, now far beyond the sun's reach, traveling through the galaxy in silence, carrying with them the calm memory of their origin. And even though they no longer belong to the solar system, they remain part of the universe's greater balance. And this belonging without attachment feels peaceful, allowing existence without ownership. And as awareness rests within this idea, the concept of distance softens, becoming less about separation and more about freedom. And the sun continues to shine steadily for the worlds that remain, its light constant and patient, while the departed planets move through darkness that is neither empty nor hostile, but simply quiet, and this quiet invites rest, allowing the story to slow further, and the solar system feels complete, not because nothing left, but because everything moved where it needed to be. And this sense of completion encourages the mind to relax fully, drifting deeper into calm, as the universe continues its slow, balanced motion, holding both closeness and distance with equal ease. And the outward, drifting planets rest now within the endless night between stars, their journey ongoing, while the solar system remains peaceful beneath the sun's gentle glow, and sleep settles naturally, carried by the same soft forces that guide worlds across the dark. A quieter and more introspective idea suggests that some lost planets were never physically removed at all, but became hidden through stillness, settling into distant, stable regions where movement slowed so much that change became almost impossible to notice. And in these far-reaching zones of the solar system, time stretches differently, allowing planets to exist in deep calm without interaction. And these worlds may orbit so far from the sun, or so slowly, that their presence blends seamlessly into the background of space, making them difficult to distinguish from the darkness around them. And this hidden existence does not feel like disappearance, but like deep rest, where activity fades and awareness softens. And such planets may still follow predictable paths, guided gently by the sun's distant gravity, completing orbits that take tens of thousands of years, long enough for motion to feel like silence. And as you imagine these worlds, there is no need to picture cold emptiness, but rather a profound stillness, where nothing demands attention and nothing changes quickly. And this stillness feels peaceful, because it suggests safety rather than isolation, and the solar system appears comfortable with such quiet companions, allowing them to exist without disturbance, without needing to be observed or named. And the myths that arise from this idea often describe hidden planets, shadow worlds, or unseen companions. Yet beneath these stories lies a gentle truth, where existence does not require visibility, and the universe does not insist on being fully known, allowing some things to remain softly concealed. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept that not everything needs to be found or understood to belong. And these hidden planets may carry ancient surfaces unchanged for billions of years, resting in a state of near perfect balance, untouched by collisions or warmth. And this preservation feels calming, because it suggests continuity without effort, and the sun's light reaches them faintly, just enough to remind them of connection, but not enough to disturb their rest. And this faint connection feels kind, offering presence without intrusion. And the remaining planets continue their familiar paths closer in, their motions steady and predictable, supported by a system that allows both activity and stillness to coexist, and this coexistence feels natural, removing the idea that movement is more important than rest. And as the night deepens, the story itself slows further, becoming less about events and more about quiet existence. And the hidden planets rest now within the far reaches of the solar system, unseen but complete, while everything else continues calmly, and awareness follows this stillness, drifting gently toward deeper rest, carried by the same patience that allows worlds to exist quietly in the dark. Another peaceful idea within the long memory of the solar system suggests that some planets were never truly lost, destroyed, or removed, but instead slowly faded from importance as the system evolved, becoming quieter participants whose influence softened until it blended seamlessly into the background of cosmic motion. And in the earliest eras, when everything was new and dynamic, these planets may have played noticeable roles, gently shaping orbits, guiding material, and contributing to balance. Yet as time passed and the system matured, their presence became less pronounced, not because they vanished, but because stability reduced the need for their influence. And this fading feels natural rather than tragic, because it mirrors the way early structures often give way to more refined forms without resistance, and these planets may still exist today, moving along predictable paths, yet their motions are so subtle, and their interactions so rare, that they feel invisible against the vast stillness of space, and this invisibility does not suggest absence, but deep integration, where something becomes part of the system, so completely that it no longer stands apart. And as you imagine these quiet worlds, there is no drama in their story, only a gradual softening of relevance as the solar system found equilibrium, and the sun continued shining steadily, offering the same gravity and light regardless of how noticeable each planet's role became. And this impartiality feels comforting, because it removes hierarchy and judgment, allowing every body to exist without needing to prove significance. And the myths that emerge from this idea often describe missing planets or forgotten worlds. Yet beneath these stories lies a calmer reality, where change is measured not in disappearance, but in quiet adaptation. And the universe appears content with allowing importance to shift gently over time, without announcing the transition. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept that not all contributions remain visible forever, and that fading does not mean failing, but completing a role. And these planets may still contribute through subtle gravitational stability, acting as anchors within long orbital cycles, maintaining calm without drawing attention. And this unseen contribution feels deeply restful, because it suggests that support does not require recognition, and the solar system itself seems built upon countless such quiet roles, where balance is maintained through cooperation rather than dominance. And as the remaining planets settled into stable configurations, their paths became simpler, their interactions calmer, while the quieter planets blended further into the system's rhythm. And this rhythm feels slow and dependable, like breathing during deep sleep, and the sun's light continues to reach them faintly or strongly depending on distance, without preference, touching everything equally. And this equality feels soothing, reinforcing the idea that existence itself is enough. And as time extends across billions of years, the difference between what is central and what is peripheral becomes less meaningful, because everything moves within the same gravitational harmony, and these faded planets rest within that harmony, complete in their stillness, and the myths that surround them soften with time, becoming gentle questions rather than urgent mysteries, and the universe seems comfortable leaving such questions unanswered, allowing uncertainty to remain part of its natural state. And this allowance encourages rest, because it removes the pressure to resolve or define every detail. And as awareness follows this calm acceptance, thoughts loosen and drift, becoming less distinct, like distant planets whose presence is felt but not seen. And the story itself becomes a quiet background, rather than a sequence to follow, supporting rest rather than demanding attention. And the solar system continues its steady motion, guided by patience rather than force, holding both prominent worlds and faded companions within the same structure. And this shared structure feels kind and inclusive, allowing everything to belong without competition. And the faded planets continue their slow journeys, unchanged and unbothered, existing within deep time where nothing rushes and nothing ends abruptly. And this deep time feels comforting, because it suggests continuity beyond awareness. And as the night deepens, the mind settles further, guided by the idea that even when something becomes quiet or unnoticed, it remains part of the whole, and the universe continues calmly, supporting all roles, visible and invisible, beneath the steady light of the sun, while awareness drifts gently into uninterrupted rest. Another deeply calming perspective on the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds existed primarily as stabilizers rather than destinations, forming not to be remembered individually, but to help the system learn balance during its earliest and most restless stages. And in this view, planets were not all meant to endure as separate identities, but some served quiet purposes before gradually stepping back, allowing more stable arrangements to emerge. And these stabilizing planets may have orbited in regions where gravitational tension was high, gently absorbing excess motion, redirecting energy, and smoothing irregular paths without ever drawing attention to themselves. And this role did not require permanence, only presence for a time. And as the solar system matured, their necessity faded naturally, allowing them to dissolve, merge, or drift without disruption. And this fading feels peaceful rather than tragic, because it reflects completion rather than loss. And as you imagine these planets, there is no need to assign them names or forms, because their purpose was functional rather than symbolic, existing to guide motion rather than to be observed. And the sun's gravity worked alongside them patiently, not overpowering, but cooperative, allowing these worlds to fulfill their roles slowly. And once balance was achieved, the system no longer required their support, and they were free to change, disperse, or blend into other structures. And this freedom feels gentle, because it removes obligation and urgency. And the myths that arise from this idea often describe missing planets, whose absence feels noticeable. Yet beneath these stories lies a quieter truth, where absence itself is evidence of success, showing that stability no longer needs assistance. And the universe appears comfortable with this kind of quiet completion, allowing roles to end without ceremony. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to release the need for permanence, understanding that some things exist only for a phase, and that this temporary existence is not incomplete, but perfectly aligned with purpose. And these stabilizing planets may now exist as scattered material, subtle gravitational influences, or faint structural patterns within the system, supporting calm without being recognized. And this unseen support feels deeply reassuring, because it suggests that balance often comes from what is no longer visible. And the remaining planets continue their steady orbits, benefiting from foundations laid long ago, even if those foundations are no longer identifiable. And this continuity feels safe, because it shows that stability can persist, even when its origins fade from memory, and the sun continues to shine evenly, illuminating everything without distinction, reinforcing the idea that contribution does not require recognition. And as time extends across billions of years, the system becomes quieter, its movements smoother, and its structure simpler, while the memory of stabilizing worlds softens into deep time, existing now only as possibility rather than record. And this softness feels kind, because it allows mystery without tension, and the universe does not insist on preserving every detail, allowing some histories to dissolve naturally. And as awareness rests within this acceptance, thoughts begin to slow, releasing the need to hold on to identities or outcomes. And the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of completed roles, where nothing was taken away, only gently released. And this release feels restful, because it aligns with the natural rhythm of rest itself. And the solar system continues calmly, supported by layers of past interactions that no longer need attention. And these layers feel like a quiet foundation beneath visible motion, steady and reliable. And as the night deepens, the story becomes less about what once existed, and more about the calm that remains, and the stabilizing planets rest, now within the system they helped shape, their work complete, while the sun's steady presence continues to guide everything gently, and awareness drifts further into deep, uninterrupted rest, carried by the same patience that allowed balance to emerge naturally, without force, without urgency, and without loss. Another soothing idea woven into the mystery of the solar system's lost planets is the possibility that some worlds slowly became emotionally invisible, rather than physically absent, meaning they continued to exist, yet their stories faded because nothing dramatic ever happened to them. And in a universe that often remembers explosions, collisions, and bright events, quiet endurance can easily be overlooked, and these planets may have followed stable, uneventful paths for billions of years, changing so gradually that no single moment stood out enough to be recorded or remembered. And this kind of quiet existence does not feel empty, but deeply peaceful, because it suggests safety rather than insignificance. And as the solar system evolved, attention naturally shifted toward worlds with visible change, leaving these calm planets to drift gently through time without observation. And this drifting was not loneliness, but rest, where nothing demanded adaptation or defense. And the sun continued to provide steady gravity and light without interruption, allowing these planets to remain unchanged, their surfaces settling into stillness, their atmospheres thinning or stabilizing into quiet balance. And over immense spans of time, their lack of activity made them blend into the background of space, becoming part of the system's silence rather than its narrative. And this blending feels gentle, because it removes pressure to perform or transform. And the myths that grow around missing planets often assume disappearance, yet beneath these assumptions lies the possibility that some worlds simply became too calm to notice. And the universe seems comfortable, allowing such calm to exist without acknowledgement. And as awareness rests within this idea, it becomes easier to accept stillness as a valid form of existence. And these planets may continue to orbit today, following slow, predictable paths that rarely intersect with others, creating no disruptions and requiring no adjustment. And this predictability feels reassuring, because it suggests reliability without effort. And the solar system itself appears to value such reliability, allowing both active and inactive worlds to coexist within the same gravitational structure. And the sun does not differentiate between those that change and those that remain constant, shining evenly on all. And this evenness feels kind, because it removes the idea that motion is more meaningful than rest, and as time stretches forward, these quiet planets become symbols of continuity, showing that not everything needs to evolve rapidly to remain relevant, and their presence supports balance simply by being steady. And this steadiness feels deeply calming, mirroring the slow rhythm of breathing during deep sleep, and the stories humans tell often overlook such quiet roles. Yet the universe does not require recognition to sustain function, and these planets continue their journeys without awareness or intention, guided only by gravity's patience, and this patience feels infinite, allowing existence to unfold without urgency. And as awareness drifts through this perspective, thoughts soften, becoming less reactive and more spacious, and the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of forgotten calm, where presence continues even when attention fades, and this transformation feels restful, because it reframes absence as peace rather than lack, and the solar system continues calmly, its structure supported by countless such quiet contributors, visible and invisible, active and still, and the sun remains steady at the center, offering consistency rather than command, and as the night deepens, the story itself becomes part of the background, allowing rest to take priority over understanding, and these quiet planets rest, now within their unchanging paths, complete in their stillness, while awareness follows their example, drifting gently into deep, uninterrupted sleep, supported by the same calm forces that allow worlds to exist quietly for billions of years without needing to be seen. Another gentle layer in the mystery of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds were slowly reshaped not by motion or collision, but by time itself, as if time acted like a soft current, gradually smoothing their edges, lowering their contrasts, and reducing their presence until they blended completely into the larger structure of space. And in this view, nothing dramatic was required for a planet to be considered lost, because lost did not mean removal, but quiet erosion of distinction, and these planets may have begun as clearly defined worlds with orbits, rotations, and internal processes. Yet over billions of years, small influences accumulated, thermal cycles softened surfaces, minor gravitational nudges adjusted paths, and radiation gently altered composition. And none of these changes demanded attention, because each one was subtle and slow, unfolding beneath awareness, and as these influences layered over one another, the planets gradually became less dynamic, their changes less noticeable, until eventually they reached a state where nothing new happened at all, and this state did not feel empty, but complete, like a final resting balance, and the sun continued to shine steadily, not pushing or pulling with urgency, but offering constant presence, allowing these planets to settle into long-term stillness, and this stillness feels deeply calming, because it suggests an end without disruption, a conclusion without conflict, and the myths that arise from such planets often assume disappearance, because nothing seems to happen. Yet beneath this assumption lies a quieter truth, where stillness itself is the outcome, and the universe appears comfortable with allowing things to become unremarkable, understanding that not everything must remain active to remain real. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to release the need for change or progress, recognizing that rest is also a form of resolution, and these planets may still exist today, moving along slow, unchanging paths, their surfaces unchanged for eons, their internal activity minimal, and their presence blending into the background of the solar system's rhythm. And this blending feels gentle, rather than lonely, because it removes expectation, allowing existence without demand, and the remaining planets continue their orbits, some active, some dynamic, while these quiet worlds rest alongside them, equally valid within the system's balance. And the sun does not favor one over another, illuminating all evenly, reinforcing the idea that contribution does not depend on visibility. And as time stretches further, these planets become symbols of deep time itself, embodying patience, continuity, and calm, and their quiet endurance supports the system simply by being stable. And this stability feels reassuring, because it suggests that balance does not always come from action, but often from consistency, and the stories humans tell rarely focus on such worlds, preferring motion and change. Yet the universe does not require narrative excitement to sustain harmony, and as awareness settles into this understanding, thoughts soften, slowing naturally, releasing the need to follow events or outcomes, and the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of planets that finished becoming, reaching a state where no further transformation was necessary. And this completion feels restful, because it removes the pressure to continue evolving. And the solar system continues calmly, supported by both active motion and quiet stillness, each playing a role without competition. And the sun remains steady at the center, not commanding, but providing consistency. And as the night deepens, the story itself fades gently into the background, allowing rest to deepen. And these time-softened planets rest now within their unchanging balance, complete and undisturbed, while awareness follows their example, drifting slowly into deep, uninterrupted sleep, guided by the same patient forces that allow worlds to exist quietly across billions of years, without needing to change or be noticed. Another tranquil explanation within the story of the solar system's lost planets rests in the idea that some worlds slowly surrendered their individuality through long-term resonance, where repeated, gentle gravitational patterns gradually synchronized their motion with larger bodies, and this synchronization did not feel like control or capture, but like falling into a shared rhythm that required less effort to maintain. And in the early solar system, resonance was common, because many bodies moved through overlapping paths, exchanging energy in small, consistent amounts, and some planets may have entered these resonant relationships so deeply that their independent orbits softened, adjusting again and again until separation no longer served a purpose. And over immense spans of time, these worlds may have merged dynamically with larger planetary systems, not through collision, but through orbital harmony, where their motion became an extension of another body's gravitational pattern. And this merging did not erase them suddenly, but gradually absorbed their influence, allowing their distinct presence to fade, while their contribution remained active. And this process feels deeply calming, because it suggests unity achieved through cooperation rather than force. And as you imagine these resonant planets, there is no sharp boundary between what they were and what they became, only a slow blending of motion that feels natural and effortless. And the sun continued to anchor everything gently, its gravity providing a stable background that allowed resonance to persist without disruption. And this stability feels comforting, because it removes urgency and conflict from change. And the myths that grow around missing planets often describe destruction or disappearance. Yet beneath these stories lies the possibility that some worlds simply joined larger patterns so completely that they no longer needed to stand alone. And the universe seems comfortable with this kind of quiet unity, allowing individuality to soften without loss of meaning. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept blending and connection without fear of erasure, understanding that joining a rhythm does not remove existence, but redistributes it, and these planets may now exist as subtle contributors within larger orbital systems, influencing rotation, stability, and long-term balance without being identifiable as separate entities. And this subtle influence feels deeply restful, because it suggests that support can be quiet and continuous, and the remaining planets continue their paths, some independent, some resonant, all moving within a shared gravitational harmony that does not demand attention. And the sun shines evenly on all, reinforcing the idea that belonging does not require distinction. And as time extends forward, these resonant planets become indistinguishable from the systems they support, their identity fully integrated, and this integration feels complete rather than diminished, because it represents an end state where nothing more is required. And the stories humans tell often overlook such outcomes, preferring clear separations and dramatic events, yet the universe does not favor clarity over calm, allowing complexity to resolve quietly into simplicity. And as awareness rests within this perspective, thoughts slow naturally, releasing the need to maintain boundaries or definitions, and the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of planets that found rest within shared motion. And this rest feels deeply soothing, aligning with the natural rhythm of sleep itself, where individual thoughts dissolve into a continuous state of calm. And the solar system continues peacefully, supported by layers of resonance and balance that operate without awareness, and these layers feel like a quiet foundation beneath all motion, steady and reliable. And as the night deepens, the story becomes less about events and more about harmony, allowing rest to take precedence over understanding. And the resonant planets rest now within the rhythms they joined so gradually, their journey complete, while the sun remains steady at the center, offering consistency rather than command, and awareness drifts gently into deep, uninterrupted sleep, carried by the same patient patterns that guide worlds, orbits, and the endless calm of space. Another softly unfolding idea in the story of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds slowly withdrew into quiet isolation, not because they were pushed away or destroyed, but because their paths naturally carried them into regions where interaction became rare and influence diminished. And in these distant or gently inclined orbits, planets may have continued to exist in calm solitude, untouched by collisions, resonances, or dramatic change. And this solitude does not feel lonely, but protective, like a deep silence that allows preservation rather than decay. And as the early solar system settled, regions of relative calm emerged, where motion slowed and encounters became unlikely. And some planets may have drifted into these regions, finding long-term stability away from the busier inner zones, and over immense spans of time, their lack of interaction caused them to fade from attention, not because they vanished, but because nothing about them changed enough to be noticed. And this fading feels peaceful, because it suggests safety rather than neglect, and the sun's gravity still reached them, faint but reliable, providing connection without disturbance. And this distant connection feels gentle, like warmth felt through memory rather than touch. And these planets may have followed slow, elongated paths that took thousands or millions of years to complete a single orbit, making motion feel like stillness. And as you imagine these worlds, there is no harsh cold or emptiness, but a profound quiet where nothing interrupts balance. And the myths that arise from such planets often imagine hidden worlds or secret companions. Yet beneath these ideas lies a simpler truth where isolation itself became the reason for forgetting. And the universe seems comfortable, allowing such isolation to exist without assigning meaning or drama. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept solitude as a state of rest rather than absence, and these planets may still exist today, unchanged, their surfaces preserved by time, their internal processes slowed to near stillness. And this preservation feels deeply calming, because it suggests continuity without effort. And the remaining planets continue their more familiar motions closer to the sun, while these isolated worlds exist quietly at the edges, contributing stability simply by maintaining predictable paths. And this predictability feels reassuring, because it shows that calm does not require interaction, and the sun does not distinguish between near and far, shining steadily, its influence extending outward without preference. And this impartiality feels kind, removing the idea that closeness determines value. And as time stretches onward, the isolation of these planets becomes permanent, not because escape is impossible, but because no force demands movement. And this lack of demand feels restful, allowing existence without pressure. And the stories humans tell often overlook such quiet states, preferring action and change. Yet the universe does not prioritize excitement over balance, allowing stillness to endure indefinitely. And as awareness settles into this perspective, thoughts soften further, becoming less reactive and more spacious, mirroring the quiet paths of these distant worlds. And the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of planets resting beyond attention, complete without recognition. And this completeness feels soothing, because it removes the need for validation, and the solar system continues calmly, its structure wide enough to hold both activity and isolation without conflict. And the sun remains steady at the center, not calling or pulling with urgency, but simply existing as an anchor. And as the night deepens, the story itself dissolves into background calm, allowing rest to take priority. And these isolated planets rest, now within their distant orbits, untouched and untroubled, while awareness follows their stillness, drifting gently into deep, uninterrupted sleep, guided by the same quiet forces that allow worlds to exist peacefully at the edges of space for billions of years, without needing to be seen. Another serene possibility in the long and quiet history of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds slowly became teachers rather than residents, meaning their greatest influence was not in how long they stayed, but in what they taught the system during its most formative moments. And these planets may have existed briefly yet meaningfully, shaping early motion, influencing spacing, and guiding material before gently stepping aside. And this stepping aside did not involve destruction or failure, but completion, like a lesson fully learned and no longer needed. And in the early solar system, where chaos and order were still negotiating balance, such guiding worlds may have played essential roles by absorbing instability, redirecting excess energy, or defining safe distances between larger bodies. And once these roles were fulfilled, their continued presence was no longer required, allowing them to merge, disperse, or drift without disrupting harmony. And this idea feels deeply calming, because it frames disappearance as wisdom rather than loss. And as you imagine these planets, there is no urgency in their existence, only purpose fulfilled quietly, and the sun's gravity worked patiently alongside them, offering a steady backdrop against which these lessons unfolded. And this patience feels comforting, because it suggests that growth does not require pressure. And the myths that arise from vanished planets often speak of mystery or tragedy. Yet beneath these stories lies the possibility that some worlds simply finished what they came to do, and the universe seems comfortable, allowing such completion without ceremony. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept endings as natural transitions rather than abrupt stops, and these planets may now exist only as subtle influences, embedded within the system's structure. Their lessons preserved in orbital spacing, resonance patterns, and long-term stability, and this preservation feels reassuring, because it shows that impact does not require permanence, and the remaining planets continue their steady paths, supported by a system refined through countless quiet contributions, many of which are no longer visible. And this invisibility does not lessen their importance, but confirms their success, and the sun continues to shine evenly, offering consistency rather than direction, reinforcing the idea that guidance can be subtle and still effective. And as time extends across billions of years, the memory of these teaching planets fades naturally, leaving behind a system that no longer needs instruction, and this independence feels peaceful, because it suggests maturity without conflict, and the universe does not hold on to what is no longer necessary, allowing change to happen gently. And as awareness settles into this perspective, thoughts soften, releasing the need to hold on to every moment or outcome, and the idea of lost planets transforms into an idea of completed guidance, where nothing was taken away, only passed forward. And this transformation feels deeply restful, aligning with the rhythm of sleep itself, where the mind releases lessons learned and rests without effort. And the solar system continues calmly, shaped by influences that no longer need to be present. And these influences feel like a quiet foundation beneath all motion, steady and reliable. And as the night deepens, the story itself becomes less about events and more about the calm that remains after learning is complete. And these teaching planets rest now within the balance they helped create, their role fulfilled, while the sun remains steady at the center, offering warmth and stability without demand. And awareness follows this calm completion, drifting gently into deep, uninterrupted sleep, supported by the same patient forces that allow worlds, systems, and even lessons to arrive, guide, and then quietly fade when their work is done. Another peaceful interpretation of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds slowly became memories rather than objects, meaning their physical presence mattered less over time than the subtle imprint they left on the system's overall character. And these planets may have existed during an era when everything was still learning how to move together, when gravity was experimenting with balance and distance, and even brief presences could leave lasting impressions, and these worlds may have gently influenced neighboring bodies, slightly altering tilts, rotations, or orbital spacing in ways so small that they were never dramatic, yet meaningful over billions of years. And as time passed, their direct influence faded, but the patterns they helped establish remained, woven quietly into the structure of the system. And this idea feels deeply calming, because it suggests that existence does not end when form disappears, but continues through influence and memory. And as you imagine these planets, there is no need to picture destruction or departure, only a gradual quieting, where a world's role becomes complete, and its presence becomes subtle rather than absent. And the sun remains steady throughout this process, offering constant gravity and light, allowing patterns to settle naturally without disruption. And this steadiness feels comforting, because it removes urgency and conflict from change. And the myths that grow around missing planets often search for physical explanations. Yet beneath those stories lies the possibility that some worlds simply transitioned from being participants to being foundations, shaping the system without remaining visible. And the universe appears comfortable with this kind of quiet legacy, allowing influence to persist without requiring form. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept that not everything meaningful must remain tangible, and these planets may now exist only as gentle adjustments within the solar system's harmony, subtle alignments that support long-term stability without being noticed. And this unseen support feels deeply restful, because it suggests that balance often comes from what is no longer present, and the remaining planets continue their steady orbits, unaware of the quiet guidance that shaped their paths long ago. And this unawareness feels natural, because the universe does not require gratitude or recognition to function. And the sun continues to shine evenly, illuminating all worlds without distinction, reinforcing the idea that contribution does not need acknowledgement. And as time extends further, the difference between past and present softens, blending into a continuous flow where cause and effect feel gentle rather than sharp, and these memory planets rest within that flow, their influence complete, their story finished without needing an ending. And this completion feels soothing, because it aligns with the rhythm of deep rest, where thoughts fade but their effects remain, and the solar system continues calmly, shaped by layers of quiet influence that no longer need to act. And these layers feel like a soft foundation beneath all motion, steady and dependable. And as the night deepens, the story itself becomes less something to follow, and more something to rest within, allowing the mind to let go of detail and drift into calm. And these lost planets rest, now as part of the system's memory, rather than its inventory, complete in their contribution, while the sun remains steady at the center, holding everything gently without demand. And awareness follows this gentleness, drifting slowly into deep, uninterrupted sleep, guided by the same patience that allows worlds to influence, fade, and still belong. Another deeply soothing explanation for the solar system's lost planets rests in the idea that some worlds gradually became part of the sun's extended family, rather than remaining independent travelers, meaning they did not collide, vanish, or escape, but slowly surrendered their separateness through time, radiation, and subtle gravitational exchange. And in this view, these planets moved closer to the sun emotionally rather than physically, allowing their identities to soften until they blended into the environment, shaped by solar influence. And during the early ages of the solar system, the sun was more active, sending waves of energy, charged particles, and gentle pressure outward. And some smaller or less stable planets may have responded by slowly losing their outer layers, not in sudden bursts, but through quiet release, particle by particle, year after year. And this release did not feel violent, but inevitable, like breath leaving the body during deep rest. And as these planets lost material, their cores remained for a time, orbiting peacefully, gradually becoming lighter, quieter, and less defined, and eventually, they may have dissolved entirely into solar dust, magnetic fields, or faint streams of matter that now exist as part of the sun's extended presence. And this process feels deeply calming, because it reframes loss as intimacy, rather than separation. And as you imagine these planets, there is no moment of fear or collapse, only a long, gentle closeness where the boundary between planet and star becomes less important. And the sun does not dominate this process aggressively, but simply exists as a constant source of influence, allowing matter to decide where it belongs. And this choice feels kind, because it removes force from transformation, and the myths that arise from planets disappearing near the sun often describe fiery endings or destruction. Yet beneath these stories lies the possibility that some worlds simply became part of the solar environment, so completely that they could no longer be identified as separate objects. And the universe seems comfortable with such blending, understanding that individuality is not always required for contribution. And as awareness drifts through this idea, it becomes easier to accept closeness without fear of erasure, recognizing that merging can be a form of rest, and these planets may now exist within the sun's outer atmosphere, within solar winds, or within the subtle chemical composition that influences all remaining worlds, supporting balance without being visible. And this unseen presence feels deeply reassuring, because it suggests that nothing is wasted, and that even when form disappears, essence remains active, and the remaining planets continue their orbits, warmed and guided by a sun shaped partly by everything that has ever approached it. And this shaping feels intimate, because it shows that the system is not static, but deeply interconnected, and as time extends across billions of years, the idea of planets becoming part of the sun feels less like an ending and more like a return, where matter moves back toward its origin calmly. And this return mirrors the way consciousness settles inward during sleep, letting go of boundaries and definitions. And the universe does not resist this inward motion, allowing closeness to unfold gently. And as awareness rests within this perspective, thoughts soften further, becoming less distinct, more blended, like light diffusing through space. And the story itself becomes less about planets and more about belonging, where nothing truly leaves the system, only changes its form of participation. And this belonging feels deeply restful, because it removes the fear of disappearance, replacing it with continuity. And the solar system continues calmly, its structure supported by countless such quiet integrations, many of which left no record, because they required none, and the sun remains steady at the center, not consuming, but holding, offering warmth and gravity without demand. And as the night deepens, the idea of lost planets dissolves into an idea of planets that found rest within closeness, their journey complete without conflict, and awareness follows this calm merging, drifting gently into deep, uninterrupted sleep, guided by the same patient forces that allow matter, light, and identity to soften naturally into unity over immeasurable time. Another gentle theory surrounding the solar system's lost planets speaks not of disappearance through destruction or absorption, but of transformation through quiet disguise, suggesting that some planets never truly vanished, but slowly became something else so familiar that we stopped recognizing them as separate worlds. And in this idea, time itself acts like a soft veil, lowering distinctions and reshaping identities until planets blend into belts, clouds, rings, or scattered families of objects that feel less like individuals and more like environments. And early in the solar system's formation, matter was abundant, movement was fluid, and definitions were still forming, allowing some planets to exist only briefly as complete bodies before stretching, fragmenting, and redistributing themselves through subtle gravitational interactions. And these interactions were not violent collisions, but repeated gentle pulls that elongated orbits, thin structures, and slowly encouraged planets to loosen their internal cohesion. And over millions of years, these worlds may have softened into wide streams of material, becoming asteroid belts, debris disks, or distant clouds of icy remnants that still orbit the sun faithfully, yet no longer carry the clear signature of a planet. And this transformation feels deeply peaceful, because it suggests adaptation rather than loss. And when ancient observers later looked outward, they saw belts and clouds instead of planets, not realizing they were gazing at the quiet afterlife of once cohesive worlds. and the universe seems comfortable allowing such gradual changes, never insisting that form must remain fixed. And as you imagine these planets slowly relaxing into scattered families of stones and ice, there is no moment of fear, only a continuous easing of structure, like muscles releasing tension during deep rest. And this process mirrors the way thoughts themselves loosen during sleep, drifting apart into fragments of memory and sensation without urgency. And the solar system appears to encourage this relaxation, allowing matter to choose stability in dispersion rather than strain in cohesion. And these disguised planets still serve a purpose, influencing orbits, shaping trajectories, and recording history within their composition, even if they no longer announce themselves loudly. And this quiet usefulness feels comforting, because it shows that visibility is not required for meaning. And some myths speak of a missing planet between Mars and Jupiter, imagining catastrophe. Yet it is equally soothing to imagine that such a planet simply became comfortable, being many things instead of one, releasing its identity gently across space, and the resulting asteroid belt does not feel like a graveyard, but like a resting field where remnants drift slowly, each piece carrying a whisper of a once unified body. And beyond the outer planets, the Kuiper belt and Oort cloud may represent similar transformations, where early planetary seeds never condensed fully, or where partial worlds relaxed into distant, patient rings of matter. And these regions feel deeply calm, because they exist far from disturbance, moving slowly, untouched for ages. And as awareness drifts through these cold, quiet expanses, there is a sense of timelessness, where change occurs so slowly it feels like stillness. And the sun continues to hold these scattered forms gently, maintaining connection without demanding unity. And this balance feels nurturing, because it allows freedom without abandonment. And the remaining planets move gracefully through a system shaped not only by what remained intact, but by what chose to become diffuse. And this choice feels wise, suggesting that endurance sometimes means letting go of sharp boundaries. And as night deepens, the idea of lost planets softens into an understanding that some worlds simply changed their way of existing, becoming quieter, broader, and less defined, yet no less real. And this understanding eases the mind, allowing thoughts to spread gently, becoming less concentrated, more spacious. And as consciousness follows this slow diffusion, it finds comfort in the idea that nothing must remain rigid to be meaningful, and that rest often comes through gentle expansion rather than collapse. And the universe supports this rest, patiently maintaining the slow dance of scattered matter, guiding it without urgency. And the story of these disguised planets becomes a lullaby of transformation, where identity relaxes, purpose continues quietly, and existence flows onward without strain. And awareness drifts deeper into calm, carried by the same soft forces that allow worlds to become fields, thoughts to become silence, and motion to become peace. Another calming possibility within the mystery of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds were never meant to stay, not because they were rejected or destroyed, but because the early solar system itself was a place of gentle wandering, where planets formed with the quiet understanding that movement was natural and permanence was optional. And in this view, certain planets were born already leaning outward, their orbits slightly unstable, their paths loosely held, as if they were listening to a call beyond the sun. And during the first hundreds of millions of years, when gravity was still negotiating balance, these planets may have slowly drifted farther and farther away, not in sudden escapes, but through long, patient migrations that unfolded so gradually, they felt like rest rather than departure. And this outward motion was not chaotic, but rhythmic, guided by subtle gravitational conversations between the sun, the giant planets, and the surrounding galaxy. And as these planets moved, they carried with them the memory of warmth and light, slowly transitioning into colder, quieter environments where motion slowed and time felt wider, and eventually, they crossed the invisible threshold, where the sun's influence weakened enough for the galaxy itself to gently welcome them, allowing them to become free, floating planets, drifting peacefully between stars, unbound yet not lost. And this idea feels deeply soothing, because it removes urgency from separation, framing it instead as a natural extension of growth, where some worlds simply needed more space to exist comfortably. And these planets did not vanish into darkness suddenly, but eased into it slowly, their surfaces cooling, their skies dimming, their internal rhythms settling into long, quiet cycles. And in this calm departure, there is no fear, only a widening sense of solitude that feels restful rather than lonely. And the galaxy is filled with such wanderers, countless planets moving silently through interstellar space, carrying within them ancient structures, frozen oceans, and echoes of early sunlight. And knowing this creates a sense of continuity, because it suggests that the solar system is not closed, but open, contributing gently to the larger cosmic environment. And these drifting planets still follow paths, still feel gravity, still belong to patterns far larger than themselves. And this belonging without confinement feels deeply reassuring, mirroring the way consciousness can drift during sleep without losing itself. And the sun, in this story, does not mourn these planets, because it understands that release is part of balance, and the remaining planets continue their orbits, subtly adjusted, stabilized by the absence of those that chose to wander. And this adjustment feels gentle, like a body settling more comfortably after shifting position. And myths of lost planets often describe violence or tragedy. Yet this quieter narrative suggests trust, where the system allows some of its members to explore beyond its boundaries without resistance. And as awareness rests on this idea, thoughts become lighter, less anchored, drifting slowly like these planets through mental space. And there is comfort in imagining these worlds moving through darkness not as exiles, but as travelers, embraced by the soft glow of distant stars, warmed occasionally by passing radiation, never hurried, never threatened. And over billions of years, they may pass near other systems, influencing dust, stirring clouds, or simply observing silently as new stars are born. And this long, slow journey feels like deep rest stretched across eternity. And as the night deepens, the concept of loss dissolves into one of expansion, where the solar system gently extends itself into the galaxy through these wandering planets. And awareness follows this extension, drifting outward, becoming spacious and quiet, unburdened by the need to stay fixed. And the universe supports this drift, offering endless room for motion without pressure. And as thoughts slow further, the idea of planets moving freely through the dark becomes a soothing metaphor for rest itself, where letting go does not mean disappearance, but a peaceful transition into a wider, quieter state of being. And consciousness settles into this understanding, guided by the same patient forces that allow worlds to drift, systems to breathe, and sleep to arrive naturally without effort. Another deeply soothing explanation for the solar system's lost planets exists not in physical disappearance, but in perceptual limitation, suggesting that some planets may still be present, calmly orbiting within the system, yet remain unnoticed because they move too slowly, reside too far away, or reflect too little light to easily announce their presence. and this idea invites the mind to relax into patience, recognizing that absence does not always mean non-existence. And during the early formation of the solar system, countless planetary bodies formed across wide distances, some settling into familiar paths close to the sun, while others adopted vast, elongated orbits that carry them so far into darkness that they appear only briefly over immense spans of time. And these planets may complete a single orbit over tens, or even hundreds of thousands of years, making their movement feel almost still from a human perspective. And such slowness does not imply inactivity, but deep calm, a rhythm aligned with cosmic time rather than human urgency. And these distant worlds may drift silently through regions of extreme cold, illuminated faintly by distant starlight, their surfaces frozen, their atmospheres thin or settled, resting in long states of equilibrium. And because they reflect very little light and move so gradually, they blend seamlessly into the background of space, indistinguishable from darkness unless carefully observed over generations. And this invisibility feels peaceful rather than alarming, suggesting that the universe does not require constant attention to function beautifully. And some myths of missing planets may have emerged simply because observers expected regularity and closeness, overlooking the possibility that nature favors extremes as much as balance. And these hidden planets may still influence the solar system subtly, shaping the orbits of comets, nudging distant objects gently, and maintaining long-term stability through quiet gravitational presence. And this quiet influence feels comforting, because it reminds us that support does not need to be loud or visible to be effective. And as awareness drifts toward these unseen worlds, the imagination slows, expanding to match their pace, and thoughts begin to move more gently, stretching across time without pressure. And the sun remains connected to these planets through delicate gravitational threads that never break, even across immense distances. And this connection feels reassuring, like a distant yet enduring bond that does not require closeness to remain meaningful. And modern science continues to search for such objects, sometimes referring to them as hypothetical distant planets. Yet even without confirmation, the idea itself encourages calm curiosity rather than urgency, allowing the mind to rest in uncertainty comfortably. And the universe appears content with mystery, offering hints without full disclosure, inviting observation without demand. And as the night deepens, the concept of unseen planets becomes a metaphor for unnoticed calm within the self, where quiet parts of awareness continue to exist without attention, supporting balance silently. And these planets may remain hidden for ages longer, completing their slow orbits without interruption, witnessing the slow evolution of the solar system from afar. And their patience feels infinite, teaching that not all motion needs recognition, and not all existence needs affirmation. And as consciousness mirrors this patience, it begins to loosen its need for clarity, settling instead into trust. And the darkness surrounding these planets does not feel empty, but full, containing potential, memory, and continuity. And the solar system becomes a place not only of visible harmony, but of unseen stability, where much of its strength lies beyond perception. And as awareness drifts deeper into this understanding, the mind relaxes further, accepting that some truths remain distant by design, and that peace often resides in what does not announce itself. And the gentle presence of these hidden worlds continues uninterrupted, holding the system quietly together, while consciousness follows their slow rhythm, drifting effortlessly toward deep, restorative sleep, guided by the same unseen forces that shape planets, space, and rest itself. Another tranquil interpretation of the solar system's lost planets suggests that some worlds did not disappear through motion or distance, but through time itself gently rewriting their stories, meaning that what we consider a planet today may not match what a planet once was. And in the earliest eras of the solar system, definitions were fluid, shapes were unstable, and identity was not yet fixed, allowing certain bodies to exist in states that no longer align with modern classifications. And these ancient planets may have slowly cooled, hardened, and simplified until their complexity faded into something quieter, more minimal, and less recognizable. And over billions of years, internal heat escaped, magnetic fields weakened, atmospheres thinned, and geological motion slowed until these worlds became almost entirely still. And in that stillness, they stopped signaling their presence strongly, blending into the background of space, like thoughts dissolving during deep sleep. And this fading was not sudden or tragic, but gradual and gentle, allowing the planets to rest into simpler forms of existence. And some may now exist as cold, dense cores drifting silently, no longer active enough to display the characteristics we associate with planets, yet still present, still real, still part of the system's quiet architecture. And this idea feels deeply soothing, because it frames loss as rest rather than failure, suggesting that even worlds are allowed to become tired and settle into calm. And myths of vanished planets may simply reflect our difficulty in recognizing things that have grown too quiet to notice. And the universe seems comfortable with this quietness, never insisting that activity must continue indefinitely. And as awareness rests on this thought, it becomes easier to accept slowing down without guilt, recognizing that stillness is not absence, but completion. And these ancient planetary remnants may occupy distant orbits, moving so slowly and reflecting so little energy that they appear indistinguishable from space itself. And yet their gravity remains, their mass persists, their influence subtle but enduring. And this quiet influence feels reassuring, because it shows that contribution does not end with visibility, and the sun continues to guide these remnants gently, maintaining connection without requiring interaction. And the remaining planets orbit peacefully, their paths shaped in part by these silent presences, even if they are no longer named or celebrated. And as night deepens, the idea of time smoothing planets into stillness becomes a calming metaphor for rest, where complexity softens and effort dissolves naturally, and consciousness follows this smoothing, letting go of sharp edges and persistent motion. And the universe appears patient, allowing everything to move towards simplicity when ready. And these planets did not fail to survive, but succeeded in completing their energetic journey, reaching a state where change slowed to near stillness. And this stillness feels like deep sleep stretched across eternity. And as awareness drifts through this perspective, the fear of disappearance fades, replaced by trust in gradual transition. And the solar system becomes a place where beginnings and endings are not dramatic events, but slow shifts in rhythm, guided by time's gentle hand. And this gentleness invites the mind to relax further, accepting that some things end not with noise, but with silence. And that silence can be full, stable, and deeply supportive. And as consciousness settles into this understanding, thoughts grow softer, fewer, less defined, mirroring the quiet state of these ancient worlds. And the universe continues its calm unfolding, holding both motion and stillness without preference, allowing planets, systems, and awareness itself to rest when their journey reaches a natural pause. And sleep arrives effortlessly, guided by the same timeless patience that allows worlds to fade gently into quiet continuity. Another deeply calming perspective on the solar system's lost planets emerges from the idea that some worlds were never truly independent in the way we imagine planets today, but were instead temporary expressions of balance that existed only while certain conditions aligned, and once those conditions shifted, these planets gently released themselves back into the larger flow of matter. And in the early solar system, gravity, temperature, and motion were constantly adjusting, creating moments where material gathered just long enough to form a planet, like body before slowly redistributing itself again. And these planets were not incomplete or unstable failures, but natural responses to a dynamic environment, forming briefly and dissolving peacefully as balance evolved. And this process feels soothing because it removes permanence as a requirement for meaning, suggesting that even temporary existence has value within the universe. And these worlds may have held shape for millions of years, orbiting calmly, experiencing cycles of light and darkness, before subtle changes in gravitational influence encouraged them to relax their structure, and over immense time, their mass may have stretched, thinned, and blended back into surrounding space, becoming streams of dust, faint rings, or diffuse clouds that still orbit the sun quietly. And this blending does not feel like loss, but like exhalation, where effort releases naturally, and myths of vanished planets may reflect humanity's instinct to look for permanence, overlooking the universe's comfort with impermanence. And as awareness rests on this idea, it becomes easier to accept that not everything is meant to remain defined forever, and these planets serve their role simply by existing when they were needed, contributing to the system's early balance, shaping orbits, absorbing energy, and influencing motion before gently stepping back. And this stepping back feels kind, allowing the system to simplify over time. And the sun continues to hold the memory of these worlds within its gravitational history, even if their forms no longer persist. And this memory feels gentle, rather than heavy, like a warmth that remains after light fades. And as night deepens, the concept of temporary planets becomes a metaphor for moments of awareness that arise and pass without needing to be held. And consciousness mirrors this rhythm, allowing thoughts to appear and dissolve without resistance. And the universe appears deeply at peace with this cycle, never insisting that structure must resist change. And these planets did not vanish suddenly, but gradually relaxed into the environment that birthed them, becoming part of a larger, quieter pattern. And this pattern supports the remaining planets, creating stability through simplicity. And as awareness drifts further, the fear of endings softens, replaced by trust in natural transitions, and the solar system reveals itself not as a rigid machine, but as a living flow where forms emerge and dissolve gently. And this flow feels deeply restful, encouraging the mind to let go of effort and expectation. And as consciousness settles into this understanding, sleep approaches naturally, guided by the same gentle forces that allow planets to exist briefly, beautifully, and then return peacefully to the cosmic whole. Another peaceful explanation for the solar system's lost planets arises from the idea that some worlds were never lost at all, but carefully rearranged by the system itself in a long, quiet process of self-correction, where gravity acted not as a force of destruction, but as a patient guide, slowly reshaping the architecture of space until balance felt effortless. And in the earliest eras, the solar system was crowded, with many planetary bodies sharing overlapping regions, their paths weaving gently around one another like slow, moving currents in a calm ocean. And over time, these currents encouraged some planets to adjust their roles, moving inward, outward, or sideways into new configurations that reduced tension and increased harmony. And this rearrangement did not require collisions or dramatic ejections, but unfolded through countless small gravitational interactions that nudged planets into more suitable positions. And in some cases, these nudges may have transformed planets into moons, companions, or satellites of larger worlds, allowing them to remain within the system while releasing the responsibility of independent orbit. And this idea feels deeply soothing, because it frames change as cooperation, rather than conflict, suggesting that some planets found greater peace by becoming part of something larger. And myths of missing planets may reflect moments when observers expected individuality, not recognizing that union can be a form of survival. And as awareness drifts through this perspective, the solar system begins to feel like a community, rather than a hierarchy, where roles shift naturally to maintain balance. And these planets did not fail to remain planets, but succeeded in adapting, choosing stability through relationship, and over immense time, their identities may have softened, their histories absorbed into the worlds they now accompany, and yet their presence continues quietly, influencing tides, stabilizing rotations, and shaping climates in subtle ways. And this quiet influence feels comforting, because it shows that contribution does not require recognition. And the universe appears content, allowing such silent partnerships to persist without explanation. And as night deepens, the idea of planets becoming moons becomes a gentle metaphor for rest, where independence relaxes into support, and effort dissolves into shared motion. And consciousness mirrors this relaxation, allowing the need to stand alone to soften, and the sun continues to hold the entire system gently, supporting both independent and bonded worlds without preference. And this balance feels nurturing, because it allows diversity of existence without pressure. And the remaining planets move calmly, their orbits stabilized by countless such adjustments made long ago. And these adjustments feel wise, suggesting that the system learned how to care for itself over time. And as awareness settles into this understanding, the fear of change fades, replaced by trust in quiet adaptation. And the solar system reveals itself as a place where nothing is truly discarded, only repositioned, and where even lost planets continue their journey in new forms, contributing silently to the system's long-term peace. And this peace invites the mind to slow further, letting go of resistance. And as thoughts drift gently, they follow the same patient rhythm that allowed planets to find new roles without urgency. And sleep arrives naturally, supported by the understanding that balance does not require force, only time. And the universe continues its calm rearrangement, holding all things softly within its steady, timeless flow. The final and most peaceful understanding of the solar system's lost planets rests in the idea that nothing was ever truly lost, misplaced, or erased, but rather that the solar system itself is a living, breathing structure that remembers everything it has ever been, carrying the imprint of every planet, every motion, and every change within its quiet gravitational memory. And in this view, lost planets are not objects that disappeared, but stories that became part of the system's deeper rhythm, woven invisibly into the movements we still observe today. And early in the solar system's history, when space was thick with matter and motion, planets formed, shifted, merged, separated, and transformed continuously, leaving behind subtle signatures in orbital patterns, chemical distributions, and gravitational balances that persist long after visible forms changed. And these signatures act like echoes, gentle reminders that presence does not require form, and that influence can continue long after identity dissolves. and this perspective feels deeply calming, because it removes the idea of failure or disappearance entirely, replacing it with continuity, where every planet that ever existed still participates quietly in the system's ongoing harmony, and the sun itself carries this memory, its mass shaped by countless interactions, its motion reflecting the collective history of everything that once moved around it, and the remaining planets respond instinctively to this inherited balance, orbiting in paths refined by ancient adjustments, made long before human awareness. And as consciousness rests on this thought, it becomes easier to trust unseen foundations, recognizing that stability often arises from layers of forgotten experience. And myths of missing planets may simply be the human mind sensing these invisible layers without knowing how to name them. And the universe does not rush to explain itself, allowing mystery to remain as a form of peace, and as night deepens, the idea of planetary memory becomes a soothing metaphor for rest, where nothing truly fades, but instead settles into deeper layers of awareness. And thoughts themselves behave this way during sleep, sinking below the surface, while still shaping the mind gently. And the solar system appears to function in the same manner, its past quietly supporting its present without demand, and these lost planets may exist, now only as influence, as slight tilts, gentle resonances, or subtle patterns in motion that scientists continue to notice without fully tracing their origin. And this subtlety feels reassuring, because it suggests that meaning does not need clarity to persist, and the universe seems content with softness, allowing truth to be felt rather than seen. And as awareness drifts further, the boundary between what is known and unknown begins to feel unimportant, replaced by trust in continuity. And the solar system reveals itself not as a puzzle missing pieces, but as a complete whole whose depth exceeds perception. And this completeness feels deeply restful, inviting the mind to stop searching and simply observe. And as observation slows, effort dissolves naturally, and sleep approaches without resistance, guided by the understanding that nothing essential has ever been lost, only transformed, integrated, and carried forward quietly. And the final image that remains is not of vanished planets, but of a system gently holding all its histories at once, moving calmly through space, stable, patient, and complete. And consciousness mirrors this calm completeness, settling softly into deep, uninterrupted rest, held by the same timeless forces that guide planets, stars, and the quiet continuity of existence itself.